Hello, everyone. I want to share a quick story about a friend of mine who was a freelancer in Buenos Aires in Argentina. She told me this story. Every month, she would take a 1.5 hour journey on a ferry to Colonia in Uruguay. She wasn't doing this for fun. The reason she was doing this is because she wanted to get paid by the European company that was employing her. Back then, Argentina's capital controls made it very difficult to actually get paid within Argentina if you were a freelancer working for a company abroad. So she had to do this 1.5 hour trip every single month to go collect her paycheck. Today, we're talking to Pedro Barros, who is the SVP and General Manager of Contractors at Remote.com, about how stories like Maria's are driving innovation in global payments, particularly relevant because Pedro was previously Remote.com's head of finance, which gives him a very unique perspective on both the human impact and the technical challenges of paying international contractors. So, Pedro, Maria's story might resonate with many contractors, but for many, it's a very unfamiliar challenge. Do you have any other anecdotes of similarly challenging contractor situations?
Well, in Argentina, it's a reality. I think obviously the country is going through different challenges today and a different perspective, but we certainly faced many customers in geographies with high risk of volatility, inflation, currency depreciation, facing those challenges from Nigeria, Turkey, Venezuela, Argentina, you name it. So all countries and nations that unfortunately face this challenge. Folks had to be a bit creative in how to get their funding, how to preserve their financial capacity to the work that they were doing. So your friend's story is not a single one, unfortunately, but also gave us the pleasure and the excitement of really trying to find solutions with strong partners like Stripe. How can we solve this? How can we enable these individuals across the globe to be better off financially?
Okay, Pedro, this is a fascinating story, and I really want to know more about how you guys are helping solve this problem. But first, give us a little bit of your personal context. So, what was your path here at Remote? How did you end up in this position that you're at, trying to help fix these problems?
Look, I joined Remote close to 5 years ago. We were a very tiny seed company, not what we were today with around 20 people. Today, we're around 2,000 people present in 90 plus countries around the world, supporting contractors in 200 territories and jurisdictions. So a very different company. But yes, at the time I joined as the first finance hire and subsequently head of finance, even I was the only one. And I was faced immediately with the challenge of looking at the rollout of a finance function and how to support the organization from a global perspective. So sometimes most of the companies you talk to, they go through an internationalization process. We were global by default, and we were having to support people everywhere in the world. So that was fascinating to me, very different from the more localized type of roles I had in the past, investment banking, and even in other startups. So being able to contribute globally, I think, was the key differentiator for this role compared to anything else. Look, my role evolved in a finance function, so I expanded to 75 countries. The challenges in setting up global payments for these, even treasury functions, as you can imagine, is quite challenging and quite daunting. But having had that experience and being able to understand the challenges of our users and our customers, really put me in a good position to start and lead this new business unit that we're just creating of contractor management and contractor payments.
When you were just starting out, you mentioned you were talking to customers. What were you hearing from customers which made you think, well, there's an opportunity here? And how did that unfold?
Look, when I started speaking with customers, we were right at the epicenter of the pandemic. So usually the first question was, did you do it? I'm like, no. Look, customers want to be global. Customers want to hire people internationally, but it's super challenging from a compliance perspective, understanding what local means, what good looks like in different geography, but also to our subject, how to pay people globally. Are you infringing any laws, or is everything compliant? How do you do it? Is there any withholding taxation? What information do I need from the other side? If you pay into Ukraine, for example, what documentation do you need to provide to the contractor so they can go to the bank every month and show that they are employed by organization X, Y, or Z. So for a customer and for our customers, this was very challenging and is still very challenging. That's why we are here to help them, and that's one of our main functions, is really to enable that smooth operation between them and their contractors and employees.
So how does remote solve some of those big, complicated problems which seem different in every single country?
Look, Alex, we have been building this expertise since our inception. We have very large legal and tax organizations, both internally and with whom we work with. And we have been building up this knowledge since then. Going back to the roots of remote started as an employer of record organization. It means that we were opening organization or we're opening subsidiaries in country and getting acquainted with all the legal requirements to employ people. So with this, we started gathering a very, very strong knowledge of what you need to do in country, which when we started operating with contractors, we were already ahead. So we knew what you need to do in the country. We knew what was the difference between an employee and a contractor. We knew what were the requirements for both. So that way we became much easier to support our customers.
What do you see your value proposition as? Because when I first looked at your website, I was like, it's not an enterprise kind of workday. It's kind of cooler than that, but it's not dedicated to those typical functions. And it's not a payments company because it's focused on mainly the management and payment of employees. So is it a kind of bringing together of those two elements? How do you see yourself when you present to customers?
Remote is an HR platform, very focused on distributed teams. So we better serve companies that are distributed globally with all their employment need from A to Z. So remote we have a job board. We enable companies to onboard individuals. We process the full life cycle of our customers. We do the same with contractors. So it means that for us to be able to serve this population, we could not just do the payments layer. We had to do the compliance layer. We had to do the life cycle layer. So there is a very strong value added to a pure HRIS, which usually doesn't have the payments layer. Well, they can integrate, but it's not native. Or they don't have the compliance layer or the life cycle layer, which we do. And the payments with a different perspective, it's just purely payments, like it's money in, money out. And we believe there is more to that. There is more that we can add to that conversation, especially given our compliance focus. And that's why I think where remote is really strong, can add value to all parties.
So are there two people in the ecosystem? There's the company who's able to scale their teams faster and find better quality talent and not restricted by borders. And then there's also the benefit for the employee or the contractor who's able to get paid seamlessly without the pains of local jurisdictions and regulations. Are those the two main selling points?
Yes, spot on. Those are our stakeholders. That's how we see it. We believe that talent is everywhere, but opportunity is not. And we are really trying to break that. Payment is obviously a subsection of everything that we try to do. But really for us, the great vision is for folks to be financially better off and financially independent wherever they are in the world. And we believe employment can really enable that for them.
Are there some headwinds lately? I see like Elon Musk is bringing everyone back into work as part of a Doge campaign in the American government. There's generally a movement to come back into the office. We probably won't be what we were before the pandemic. Does that change things for you guys, or there's always going to be need for collaboration across borders and that doesn't affect things for you?
Look, the world is quite big and companies are quite diverse and dynamic. But one thing is real. There is a scarcity for talent. And if you start only hiring people on your postcode, even dog will not be very successful. Sorry. So there's obviously a campaign, especially for individuals that are looking to high inefficiency in federal organizations, which makes sense. And we know there's a lot of inefficiency in some of those government organizations to push for people to be there to ensure that they can control and do more of micromanagement. There's also the other side that companies have large real estate portfolios and if they cannot monetize it, they want people to be in it to use it and try to get the benefits out of it. But the reality is that working from home and working remotely has been stable around 30% of the workforce since the pandemic. It went up, obviously it peaked, came back down a bit as it's expected, but it's relatively stable since then. So with an increasing larger workforce, 30% means a lot of new folks coming into the remote work setting every single day. And we only continue seeing more demand for what we do. And if we could move faster, we would be doing even more stuff for everyone. So it's a reality. We understand it. We live with it. But there's a lot of opportunity out there to enable.
Yeah, it'd be really good to understand more about the business model. So you've got the businesses who you're providing the platform for, and also the contractors. Who's driving like the main opportunities and growth in your business that keep propelling you forward?
Look, businesses continue coming to remote, and we continue seeing a huge demand for it. Given the cycle and given the stage that we are, the loop is starting to close. So you're starting to see contractors and freelancers asking the companies to be hired to buy remote. And okay, I already use them by payment. It works. Let's engage through remote. That way we open any freelancer to be able to sign in to remote, and they have a free admin page and portal for them, platform for them, and they can invite their customers to it. Then that has been working quite well. So we are starting to see the loop starting to close a bit, and the flywheel, as someone used to say, spinning.
The contractors are doing your marketing for you.
Yes. Look,
nice.
At the end of the day is who. Okay, we target our product for the companies mainly, like it's a B2B product, but our vision is to improve the lives of individuals. So if we can happily have a platform where folks come in and start inviting their own customers, for us, it's really exciting.
And who's paying? Is it the companies that are paying?
The company.
Yeah. And what does that look like? Is it subscription or is it per seat?
It's a subscription. In our standard pricing, in the standard model, we have a fair pricing policy. So if there is activity in the platform by the company and the freelancer, like an invoice, a payment, so we charge. If not, which happens many times in companies that they have large rosters of freelancers that they may engage sporadically, we don't charge when there is no activity. Not when these will be launched, but today when we are recording, we are actually launching a new product where remote is a contractor of record, where remote is starting to intermediate a relationship between our customers and our freelancers, which has many advantages for both sides. And in that case, from the moment that the contractor is engaged, there's always a fee until the statement of work terminates, and there is no engagement, so there is no fee to be paid.
I'd like to talk a little bit about stablecoins. Stablecoins are very popular right now, and that's why you guys made the news as well by implementing stablecoins on your platform. What specific payment challenges led Remote to explore using stablecoins?
Look, I think first it was your example. Folks having to travel to other countries or having to open international accounts with maybe not as ideal setups. That was the immediate main thing that we saw. But if you start digging a bit more into payments, and Alex was mentioning payment platforms, if you start digging a bit deeper on that, you start understanding there's very high fees being charged by these individuals, by these companies to individuals. So traditional international transfers are like 5 to 7% fees of the amount, which if you're working, it's a significant amount. If you look, for example, Swift payments, we cannot forget that it's still a messaging system more than anything else. So it's inefficient, it's prone to error. Many times folks are required to provide further documentation, like the case I was mentioning in Ukraine. So further delaying the payments. And if you think of a family delaying 5, 7, 10 days of a payment, it's quite significant if they have bills to pay, food to put on the table. And then obviously the case of volatility in the currency, either by hyperinflation or by other reasons. We started looking at alternatives, and usually you see folks going like, okay, let's find a way to pay in US dollars, but these are still expensive. They're still prone to payment fees, still prone to delays. And with stable coins, you start having a system that is much more immediate, which is at a much lower cost. and it can work with unbanked folks. It works on your phone. So if you have 1.4 billion people in the world that are still unbanked, this works very well for them. And I think we've seen other cases like M-Pesa in Africa, which was still with pegged to fiat currency. But in this case, like, we now created a digital currency to be able to enable what M-Pesa did a couple of years ago at scale across the globe.
Okay, I see. So if I were to summarize what the contractors were saying is, one, it takes a lot of time for me to get paid. Two, I don't really want my local currency anyway. I would prefer to have US dollars. Three, by the time the payment actually gets to me, I've lost 5 to 6, 7% of it. Whereas I would prefer to get paid in stablecoins. Now, the reason why that's interesting is because the contractor still needs to exchange the stablecoins for something, right? You haven't, say, fixed the last mile payments problem because they still need Argentinian pesos or Nigerian naira or Turkish lira at the very last step. Do you have any color on how they're handling that? Because ultimately they want to pay their bills and rent and buy services in the country where they live, for which they'll need local currency. So to rephrase the question, do you know what contractors do once they get the stablecoins?
I think one thing is clear is not a contractors only problem. Mm-hmm. It's a localized challenge. So the rise of the need of stable coins is not just on the contractor universe. These folks want this coin and they want this type of currency because it's something they can exchange, not for everything. There is many things they cannot pay utilities in a USDC, but likely they can pay, for example, for rent already in USDC. So there's starting to be an ecosystem around this. That's why we see the demand coming up for this type of currency, and contractors really wanting. So it's all the upstream things that we mentioned, but downstream there's also a market already for it. So they are not alone in the country with this, because whoever is the owner of their house they're renting from, like, I'm sure they'll be very happy getting a much more stable currency than simply localized. So the need is there, and the demand is there, and it's not just on this universe for sure.
I see. So would you say that the reason Remote implemented stablecoins is primarily due to the demand from the contractors? This was a feature that the contractors were requesting from you.
Definitely. These are folks that are global by default. Their mindset is very international. So for them, having this need to be paid in USDC or any other stable coins, for them is quite natural. And there was a high demand from this universe of individuals.
That's very interesting. And yeah, just for context, I did some research before the call, and apparently up to 70% of all physical US dollars are outside of the US, so of dollar bills. So I suspect it's much of the same use case that already has a very, very high adoption. But you guys partnered with Stripe. Stripe is a huge payments fintech. Can you tell me a little bit more about this partnership? Why did you guys decide to work together on this?
Look, we've been working with Stripe for a long time. Not only the more traditional thing people know them from, like the payments gateways, but also for global payments. So we were very early adopters, if not some of the first ones of Stripe Connect, for example. So where we can enable global payments through their network, and contractors have a Stripe account and are paid through there. So it made a huge sense for us to continue exploring that partnership further. And obviously on the back of their acquisition, they are now able to support much better stable coins. So for us, it was an immediate thing. Like, we are integrated with them. It made sense to further explore that, given we had the demand already.
I see. So this comes off the back of the $1.1 billion bridge acquisition. Exactly. Okay, that makes total sense. I was about to ask you about that.
Yeah. We already supported like paying out, for example, to Coinbase and folks like that. But this is the first fully integrated USDC experience that we have.
When you talk to a compliance professional, the first thing they're going to say is, okay, it's amazing that you're solving this problem, but what compliance measures do you have in place? With stablecoins, once you make a transaction, that's more or less final unless you can get the coin issuer to intercede for you. Whereas with other payment methods, if there's any mistake or any problem or any sort of fraud, transactions are slightly a little bit more malleable. What sort of compliance and fraud measures did you have to put in place to support this?
So remote, as I mentioned, our foundation has always been compliance. So even on implementation of something like this, we would not take lightly our compliance expectations and requirements. So we always get to know our customers with strong KYB processes, but also the contractors. So we run extensive KYC processes on the contractor side. We always have the backing of the documentation between both entities, so invoices and contracts. So there is a very strong documentation to justify the relationship and the rates being paid and invoicing being issued by the parties. So we have kept a very high compliance rigor in this. As you mentioned, compliance folks are always very uncomfortable with this high, fast innovation. But thankfully, we have a lot of these really strong and comfortable individuals in our organization. So they make us to abide by the highest standards.
Was that a bit of a difficult conversation to have with your compliance colleagues to explain to them that, yes, this is a novel payment method, but no, this is not going to end up like the FTX debacle did?
Not as much, especially given the partner we were working with. Mm-hmm. So it seemed like a natural progression for remote. Obviously, we have been working on this for a while, and even strategy-wise, it has been in play for some time. But having the right partner to do this also have a very strong confidence to our compliance and legal teams that we were doing it right. We had all the checks and balances anyway, previously from a compliance perspective for all payments. And working with Stripe further, their obviously compliance risk teams on top of this gave us strong confidence that we were working with the right team for this innovation. We also have a very senior high ex-Stripe folks in our team. So there is a very good relationship between both companies. So we were very happy with doing this with them, which gave some peace of mind to our compliance.
I can imagine. The other challenge that you may have had, and I've had many conversations kind of off the record with global companies, and many of them have said to me, I would love to implement stablecoin payouts. Our users want it. They really want to be able to pay in, pay out via stablecoins. But if I do that, I will get in trouble, not so much with the regulators, but with my local banking partner who actually banks me for 95% of my business. Is that a conversation that you guys had to have?
Not remote. Thankfully, we process large volumes of payments globally. If you look, remote at its foundation was an employer of record. Today, obviously, we have expanded to much more contractors, payroll, etc. So we still have very large sums of fiat currency going around. So we haven't yet pissed off any of our main banking partners.
You've not had to have this conversation. Although I do have to say, you guys implemented this after the US election, where the whole crypto policy seemed to change significantly.
We are more favorable terms currently with the current environment.
Okay, now I want to ask you a few questions around feature adoption, and I appreciate that there's probably limited things that you can say. But tell me a little bit more about the rollout. Where did you guys roll it out? Where did you anticipate demand? Where have you seen demand? Is there anything that has surprised you with regards to rolling out this product?
Look, we haven't seen, for time being, no surprises. So we see the demand that we would expect, like countries where we have high density of contractors, like Colombia, Nigeria, El Salvador, Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, even countries with relatively stable coins, stable currencies, sorry. I was already on the coin. Stable currencies, you see demand for this, also attached to the higher numbers that we have there. In terms of rolling out, it's what I also referenced from the onset in our conversation, global by default. We want to always enable everyone globally. As I mentioned, we support contractor management in 200 countries and territories. And we want to make sure that we can, as much as possible, serve the widest population possible. In terms of what to support from a currencies perspective, the more the merrier. If there is demand, we'll continue working with our partners to implement this. USDC obviously has a very strong appeal given the peg to the US dollar, but for sure there'll be others coming in, but also working in our partners closely as they roll out. We see if it makes sense for us to roll out as well.
This might be one of the larger, or if not the largest, sort of disbursements in stablecoins operations that is ongoing. What technical challenges have you come up that are relatively new? So I'm thinking here about stuff like the finality of payments, right? So that's more of an issue with stablecoins than it is for other traditional payment methods where things can be quasi rolled back. Have you encountered any issues with this sort of thing?
It's early days for us, Plus. I'm sure Stripe has been facing this and not surfacing all because it's their technical challenges.
Of course.
But to our end, it's a very user-friendly type of integration. So whilst we are going with this deep integration, I think we'll not see a lot of those end-to-end challenges. But if we start going more direct, I think those will start surfacing and we'll need to tackle it differently.
Fair enough. Tell me a little bit more about the user base that has already adopted this payment method. Are they predominantly new contractors that previously weren't able to be onboarded, but now this unlocks them? Or is this existing contractors who choose to shift over their current setup because it is just a lot more convenient for them to receive stablecoins?
We have seen high demand from existing contractors already. So very quick adoption to as soon as we started announcing, and it was quite widely distributed, our announcement with Stripe. Even internally, obviously, we have our own ways to share this news. We saw a very strong uptick in folks using this as their withdrawal method versus more traditional ones. Very strong demand immediately internally.
Do you, and you might not know this, but do you have any color on where they're withdrawing to? Is that something you can know?
No, I don't have.
Okay.
The team might have, but I don't have. I think we would have to likely ask individuals.
Yeah, I mean, it would be tricky to investigate. It would be also an interesting question.
Definitely.
Okay, so about these contractors, given the strong adoption, one of the questions I had was, I guess the stereotype might be that the people adopting the product are some younger, more tech-savvy, online, digital people. But by the sounds of it, it sounds like it's pretty much a universally accepted solution by now.
Yes, surprisingly, yes. So it's quite much more accepted than one would think. One would think like it's only like very tech-focused individuals that are very accustomed to this. But we've seen folks like in translation industry, some folks in media, even people like entertainment. Look, I think it's much more widely known. And although it's still innovation, the pure novelty, I think, is long gone, and folks are getting much more accustomed to it, especially if you live in a nation or a region with challenges on your currency. So I think maybe in most of European countries or even US, like wherever. But if you need to know about alternatives and if you need to be creative on how to get funding and how to work internationally, obviously we're much more aware of the different solutions out there.
Okay, and I appreciate you might not be able to share this, but is there some number you can give us? It's been a month since you guys implemented this. Can you give us some number in terms of users, in terms of dollar volume, in terms of transactions, as to just how big this has been so far?
Unfortunately, I cannot share numbers, as you can imagine, but we were positively surprised.
I want to understand, Pedro, what do you see as the next big opportunities in your roadmap? As a guy who just came fresh to this 30 minutes ago, I was trying to imagine what I would do next. And I imagine there's so many opportunities with AI to help people find good jobs and match their skills to jobs. But I imagine you could go much deeper in all the different payment methods. Like people want different currencies, people want different to work in different countries. How do you guys think about where the opportunities are? And which ones do you think are the winners?
Look, Alex, for us is to enable our customers to consolidate as much as possible their HR functions with us. And you mentioned AI to find jobs. It's super exciting. There's a lot of opportunity there. We already have a job board. So it seems like the next thing is exactly what you just mentioned. And I think 2025 for remote will be very exciting on that specific side of things. But we're also doing much more. Like everything that you do in other systems related to HR, we want to do it inside remote and have the full consolidation. So we have employer of record, we have payroll, we have contractor management. So all types of employment are mostly addressed. Now it's everything else on top of this, like you mentioned, recruitment and even other things that may be interesting as value-added services. So it's a full consolidation play. Around payments, look, it's trying to break those 3 or 4 things I've raised previously. More cost-effective, faster, and to people wherever they are in the world. So, which means addressing alternative currencies, addressing alternative payment methods, maybe new providers that are breaking how we do things and how we pay, looking to pay directly to cards. So there's a lot of alternatives out there for us to improve this, and we'll be taking this as soon as we can.
What are the kind of trends that you keep your eyes on? I imagine you keeping a close eye on the US election. Maybe there's quite a lot in the payment space that you keep your eye on. Like, what are the general trends that really interest remote?
Some of the more interesting ones, obviously, for us is job dynamics, how people are looking at the job market. You mentioned before people coming back to the office, the return to office movement. We look at that, especially like how can we continue giving value to our customers if they go through a hybrid transition, for example. So looking at the job trends, we do that with a lot of attention. Also, we look at trends from a legislative perspective. How are countries approaching working from home? Is there something we can enable them to do? Like we have been helping a lot of governments into issuing new legislation around global employment and local working from home. So how can we enable this movement towards a much more dynamic working environment and employment practices? And obviously around all finance related subjects for individuals and how to get money to individuals. You mentioned like we are with the USDC, like what sells from a currency's perspective, what sells from how they hold funding. Is there other ways to pay individuals? So there's a lot of trends out there that we need to pay attention to, but dynamics on job market, dynamics on legislation, and how to get more money faster to individuals is what we focus on.
Do you think there's a future in, like, who knows what time horizon, but in which you feature AI agents on your platform, in which customers are looking for AI agents to carry out a certain type of role, and then you would pay the person who's created the AI agent? So, for example, it's already happening in customer service where 50 to 80% of queries can be solved by an AI agent, but you need access to the AI agent itself, and the AI agent needs to be paid so the creator can receive some money. So do you think this is going to remain a human platform, or do you think there's also space to kind of find AI agents in the future?
Hard to answer on how you enable exactly the AI agent throughout this life cycle process, where what we are focusing on. But the reality is you have still an end human on the other side, as you mentioned, on the example that you mentioned. So I think we'll very much solve for that, and let's see what the future gets us in terms of enabling agency in that aspect to enable our customers, and how can we intermediate that relationship.
Yeah, it's a scary world. I really hope it doesn't arrive too soon, but maybe one day.
There is an opportunity out there, and there is space for very interesting stuff.
I have another question on AI, and I promise it will be the last one. You mentioned job trends, and many of the contractor roles that you guys serve, from translation to writing services to creatives, are the sort of contractor roles that might be potentially at risk from the AI revolution that we've seen over the last 2 years. Have you guys noticed any sort of trend in that direction whereby these services are less frequently required? Or is it the exact opposite? Is it the case that this is enabling people to be far more efficient and to take on far more work?
Look, we've seen two interesting trends around this. One is we are not seeing a reduction actually in the number of the demand for contractors, actually an increase. But I think that's the natural initial reaction, is that you add more people to try to face all challenges, current and future. But a lot of these, what we're seeing a lot is the conversion from individuals of having to do the work to be much more quality checkers. Mm-hmm. So there's folks that still want to have the human in the loop type of situation, for example, translation, but for specific cases like medicine or similar situations. And individuals that before were translating now are being enabled. Well, they have been doing this for a long time with machine translation and all that. But now with the AGI here, really having the machine doing it for them and then doing the quality work. That was one. And another, we've seen a huge demand also around this space of individuals like translation and tech, etc. Is large numbers of contractors being hired by AI companies to do the initial classification, translation, matching, etc. to train the models. So very, very large numbers, I can tell.
That is super interesting. Okay, I'm going to steer us a little bit back towards stablecoins to slowly wrap things up. I imagine that implementing this stablecoin solution, which is, as I was saying earlier, possibly one of the biggest stablecoin disbursement projects I've ever heard of. I imagine it wasn't the easiest thing in the world to do at times, and that you had to interface with and talk to with a lot of people. What would you say are some of the biggest misconceptions people had with regards to stablecoins?
I think you touched on that, which is the compliance of it. Oh, by paying stablecoins, you're evading taxation, for example. I think that is one of the biggest ones. But countries are adjusting fast, and if you are an honest player, just because you're paid in a different currency, that does not mean that you are not filing your obligations and paying your dues. So I think that was one of the biggest hurdles, like folks accepting that we are not doing this, or people don't do this with that objective in mind, but with all the other things that we touched upon. So working around that and with all parties has been interesting. In the end of the day, is enabling people to be at their best, and we'll work to ensure that.
Was that misconception in the eyes of internal stakeholders, of external legislators?
Both internal and external. But obviously we faced our internal ones, and that's why I mentioned we had very strict checks and balances on this, and how we work with individuals, how we promote this type of solutions. But I think externally there's still a lot of these misconceptions, some of them funded, others less so. But as we evolve, I think regulators are quickly picking it up and getting people to consider it as any other fiat currency that they have.
Well, Pedro, whenever you guys are ready to share numbers around this, I would be very, very interested in hearing more about it. Thank you very much for joining us today for this conversation.
Likewise. Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you very much, Alex.